How specific and detailed do you go into the role or the job that you've given AI?
Hey guys, welcome back to the Automate Me Please podcast. I'm joined by the coolest people in the entire world, Emily Duncan and Kyle Kurzhal. And so what we do here is we are three entrepreneurs. Two of us have no idea what we're doing in the AI space. One of us does, and that's Kyle. And so what we want to do here is ask Kyle lots of questions. We really want to get into how AI can support our businesses, make our businesses much more efficient than they currently are. Having said all that, first of all, thank you guys, everyone, for joining. Appreciate that very much. Emma, why don't you go ahead and take a few minutes to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Emma Duncan. I've been in the creative real estate world for over 2 years now. I specialize in transactional coordination and fractional operations. So I'm coming to this conversation in those roles of TC and operator. I want to understand how it betters my business and helps me along, but also what do I need to know for the investors that I'm coming into fractionally.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you attending as always. Your insights are fantastic. Kyle, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you're from and what do you currently do?
Yeah, so hey there, everyone. My name is Kyle Kurzhal. I like to describe myself as your go-to guy for AI and automations to help you buy back your time and grow your business. So I hail from the South, the north part of the South, I suppose, in North Alabama. I am primarily focused on assisting people set up voice AI receptionists, personal assistants, and then landing pages for lead funnels. So that's what we do at Narrow Gator. But I have, for the last 11 years, been a software engineer, and this is kind of my bread and butter. I've been following AI for the last really decade now, since I got started, and things have changed drastically, and it's really exciting. So I'm really excited to meet again with you guys. It is a good opportunity for us to share knowledge and ask questions from each other, because there's things I think I take for granted that I know that other people don't know, right? Just because of my technical background. And I think it's going to reveal a lot of really interesting stuff as we dig into this.
Em and I are very thankful that you're here, primarily because I think that the limitations of our knowledge are only going to be expanded because you're here. And by the way, after I introduce myself, that's when Emma and I will be quiet for the next hour or so to let Kyle do his thing. So thank you, Kyle. My name is Mike Jackson. I am based out of Austin, Texas. I am a real estate investor, generally just an entrepreneur. I own a couple of businesses. I've studied AI not quite as long as Kyle, but maybe for the past 2 or 3 weeks instead of the past 11 or 12 years. I am very, very new, but I'm super excited to see how we can actually implement AI into our business to make us much more effective. And so today, Kyle, what are we covering?
So we're gonna cover some basics. I think this will be really good for all of us here. Some of this requires me to refresh my knowledge and also unveils what I've forgotten. So I think the thing to remind everybody who's watching is that there's so much out there in this space. Honestly, it's too much for one person to keep up with. You could make that your full-time job and still not know all the details of the things that are out there. So there's going to be things that I forget and I have to go look up later, and we might have to come back to it. And that's okay. This is about learning. This is about moving forward. So today we're going to cover the basics. And I think maybe it makes sense to start with just some general terms, so people have a sense of what these things are. So we have this set of different AI that are out there, and it really, what most people think of as AI now, you immediately think, oh, there's ChatGPT, right? Like that was kind of the first large language model that was developed and released to the public for public use. But there's a bunch of other models out there that we progress from. And so we're not going to go super deep into this because I think you could spend a lot of time in each of these things. But there's different algorithms out there, like We have these classic like classification models where, for example, you take a picture and it tells you if it's a hot dog or not a hot dog. I think is the Silicon Valley, if you guys have ever seen that, the famous app that they created, right? There's things like, oh, well, this is a cat or a dog. So that's like typical classification models. We have some other models that let you like generate text or generate images. There's regression models. There's all these different models out there. So when people say AI, they're focused on this one little piece. AI is like this giant umbrella of all of these different machine learning algorithms. And depending on which one you're talking about will kind of set the context for the discussion. So for our purposes, I think we're going to just kind of focus primarily on the newer technologies, these large language models.
So Kyle, can I ask one of many stupid questions? So I'll start with this one today. You're right in the sense that when I think of AI, my first go-to is that little logo for ChatGPT, right? I think of that's my portal into AI from just a normal consumer standpoint. But kind of diving into some of these things where you learn a little bit more about other LLMs, right? Like Google has its own. There's Anthropic. There are a bunch of other types of LLMs out there. My assumption is that different LLMs will serve different functions. Am I understanding that correctly?
To some degree, that's true. So it depends on how the model was trained ultimately, and what kind of capabilities are accessible to these different models. So the traditional GPTs or large language models, they're really just focused on text, and you go into the chat, you ask it a question, or you go back and forth with it, and then it creates text. So that was like stage one for a lot of these LLM technologies. Stage two, we're starting to see additional resources and capabilities built in. So the really neat thing about these transformer models is that you can essentially train them on different types of information. So now we're starting to be able to see things like, it can recognize an image, and it can actually have a description or a discussion about an image. You can also have conversations with your voice with these things. You can take videos of these things, and it can tell you on the fly, oh, that's a cat that I see in the image. So we're increasing the amount of information and the amount of training on these different models, and it's increasing the flexibility of what they can do over time.
I have a question. Right. So we have mentioned LLM and GPT. Are all GPTs LLM?
Yes. I would say that all GPTs are typically LLMs. In theory, you could have a GPT that isn't an LLM, but I think we're probably not going to do that as a society, just because having the chat capabilities is really critical for the purpose of understanding language. So I would say you could, but you probably shouldn't. They're probably going to always be tied together.
Okay. I just want for the admin side of this conversation, right? Like understanding the players that are involved or the software that's involved. It's great for me to be able to carry a conversation on and know if I say ChatGPT or GPT, then it could mean LLM, right? But it might not mean that all LLMs are GPTs, right? So just in the context of talking to a client and explaining to them what is out there, I like to know what is alike and what is different.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to think of these things as like categories, right? So, before I mentioned AI is a broad category, right? Under AI, you have different subcategories. LLMs is a category or a category of certain types of models. It stands for a large language model, right? So these are models that can interact with text. And then GPTs are typically a subset of these large language models.
So Kyle, can we dive a little bit further into that just so everyone can kind of understand, myself included?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that an LLM stands for large language model, and that would be what ChatGPT is.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, cool. And that's what Anthropic would be, Gemini. Those are all LLMs.
Yes, that is exactly right.
Okay, cool. And then a GPT, what does GPT stand for, first of all?
Yeah, so a GPT, that stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. The way you think about this is a transformer is just a type of machine learning model. Without going too deep into some of the technical bits, when you put in your text into ChatGPT, what happens under the hood is that your text is turned into these little smaller tokens of text, and then it's fed into these transformer models, and the transformer models are statistical or probabilistic in the text that they're going to output. So that's what a transformer is. The generative and pre-trained part just describes more of what the transformer does. So generative just means that the transformer model is able to create new text based on its input. And again, that's going to be based on the probabilities of how it was trained with data. So it's pre-trained up front. So you feed in a bunch of data, and that kind of sets the pace for how the GPT works whenever you're interacting with it.
So that just means that if you go to ChatGPT and you type in a prompt in just the generic open window that you get when you enter ChatGPT, your response is probably going to be different compared to if you were to choose a pre-trained GPT with the same prompt, because my assumption here, and again, this is probably a stupid question, my assumption is that the GPT itself is, depending on what it's been pre-trained on, is going to output a different response just because of the information that it has available to itself.
Yeah. So these models are always dependent upon the data that they're trained with. And transformers in particular are more like statistical or probabilistic in how it figures out what text to generate next. So, it is like exactly what you said, Mike. Depending on how well they've been trained, like how much data they've been trained on, you're going to get the statistics under the hood are going to vary from input to input. And even if you put in the same input, you might get a slightly different response. So it's not always going to be, exactly the same. There are some ways that you could tweak that technically, but we won't get into that. For the purposes for most people to know is that these are based on statistics, and that's how these things work. So it's trained on tons and tons of data. Like we're talking about the entirety of the information that's available publicly on the internet, and it's, as information increases, they're just going to keep training them and retraining them and making them better. So there's some other things that these engineers do under the hood, but that's kind of the general concept.
So my thought then goes to, there's all these different kind of GPTs out there, and they're being trained at first by the engineer. And then when we start using them, we're training them specifically for our use. So from the get-go, are there certain GPTs that are good for certain tasks versus a different one, right? Like, can you help us understand which path we should take or which one we should choose at the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are different GPTs that are useful for different purposes. I think as time goes on, we're seeing them kind of converge to having similar capabilities. And that's just because like you have, for example, a company that develops a GPT that has access to maybe do video or something like that. And then the other companies are going to follow suit, right? Like they want to be competitive with one another. They want your business. And so, like there are some that are better for certain things currently, but you just have to kind of watch to see how things change over time. A good example of this would be like Claude, for example. It is really fantastic for coding capabilities. It's been known for that. OpenAI has released some newer stuff recently, which I think makes their stuff really good too. But that's what Claude was known for a while. So if you wanted to have like a coding assistant, me as a programmer, I might go with Claude for something like that. The other thing Claude is really great at that ChatGPT doesn't have today is the ability to plug into other tools. And we can get into this more later. This is something fascinating that I actually did a deep dive on last week. But there's this new protocol out there that allows these GPT models to be able to interact with coded software tools. And Claude is really neat because they allow you to hook their models up to these different tools. So, for example, if I wanted to book an appointment on my calendar, I could set up a tool in Zapier or Make or whatever you want to use. And then I could integrate the Claude system with my tool and have it make calls to it. So that's one example of how Claude is different. I know that OpenAI will probably follow suit and start to allow those features soon. OpenAI has some other things that are really good about it, like it can do speech recognition and you can have conversations with it. Claude can't do that. So it just kind of depends in the moment on what features are available.
And Kyle, that protocol that you mentioned, is that the MCP?
It is. Yeah. So that MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. And it's just a way of describing how the GPT can interact with a particular tool. So essentially the way you set it up is you say, hey, here's this tool. You kind of give it a description of what it can do. And then it is formatted in such a way that when the GPT figures out, oh, I need to call this tool, it kind of spits it out in a particular format, and then your code can take that and actually like run the executions of those things.
So it's almost like getting the agentic. It's setting yourself up to be agentic, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is actually really exciting because with this new protocol comes a vast amount of capabilities that weren't already available. A good example of this is that Zapier and Make and N8N for the folks who maybe use these services rather than programming everything themselves by hand. They've made this protocol as an interface with their services. And so now you can like hook right into these things, and it opens up access to thousands of tools out there. And so this is why, like, I would say the age of agents is upon us. And over the next year or two, it's going to get wild. It is going to be crazy awesome.
So Kyle, for me, the average user, it gets really confusing because what I see is there's ChatGPT, it's an LLM, and then there are other types of LLMs like Anthropic, right? Is that an LLM itself?
Anthropic is the company. So Claude is the
LLM.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, and then underneath Claude and then also underneath OpenAI, there are all these different kind of like submodels, right?
That's right.
And can you tell us a little bit about what those submodels are, maybe why we would want to use different submodels or models of the LLM itself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll probably stick mostly to talking. I'll talk about like some general concepts, and then maybe give some specific examples with OpenAI. I'm not as familiar with Claude. This is where I need to do some learning of my own. So there's like, I would say there's two sets of types of models under the hood. There are these models that do like generation of text or whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's an image or maybe you're feeding in a video. It does all of this in one shot. So these are going to be models like OpenAI's 4.0 model or their newer 4.1 model. And then there are models that do what's called multi-step reasoning. So this is where you will ask it to do something, and then what it'll do is it'll kind of create a plan for what needs to happen, and then it'll work through it step by step. So it'll take one step and then get some information, for example, and then it'll take that and then perform another step and another step. And those, depending on your use case, you might choose one versus another. So if you need it to do more advanced reasoning, you would probably choose the multi-step model. And if you just need it to kind of spit you out something really quick, like, for example, you need to have it generate hashtags for you, for your content or a title or description, you might use the single shot. And that's just because it's faster, you know? So it depends on how much reasoning you need built in. Some of it also depends on what kind of tools you need it to have access to. For example, like OpenAI has, with their O3 model, the capability to call certain tools. So it can actually do internet searching for you out of the gate. You don't have to turn that on as a feature, and it includes it in its multi-step reasoning. So it just depends on the model. But those are, I would say, the two major categories that you could think of when you're trying to figure out what model to use.
And how do we know the model? Like, how do we know this? Like, where do we look to know which model does what?
Yeah, this is a great question. So usually inside of the interface, it'll actually tell you. So like if I were to open it up right now, I'll pull it up right now and on my screen. If I pull this thing up, I can see when I'm selecting my models that O3 says uses advanced reasoning. Then the 4.1 model says that it's great for quick coding and analysis. So, you know, you could, based on the description that they give you in the interface, make your selection. So the other way that you could do this is you could use these LLMs to actually do the research for you and describe it to you. And so this is kind of like next level, right? Like, okay, I can use the AI model to learn more about the AI model. And then you can iterate on that. And that's actually something I did earlier in preparation for our discussion today. I went ahead and asked ChatGPT with the O3 model. I said, hey, can you explain to me what the difference is between some of these different models that are out there and the features that they have? And so it went through and it did the research on the internet for me, and it collected all this data, and then it put it together in a nice little table for me. So you can do stuff like that and improve your own learning based on some of these things and have it go do the research for you.
I don't think this has ever been so challenging for me to stay on topic, because when we start to dive into AI, right, Kyle, what you just told me makes me think about how you can set it up so that whatever prompt I put in to, I don't know, whatever. Let's say I'm putting in a prompt. I could technically, from what you're telling me, I could technically build something almost like a knowledge base that would access the knowledge base, do research to figure out which model would be best for me to use in that moment, and then use that model to complete the task.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you'll be able to do more and more of this stuff as time goes on, and these features are developed for these different tools. I think actually today, for example, with Claude, I think you can actually plug Claude into your Google Drive or your Google Docs. I think you may also be able to do the same thing for ChatGPT. So, you could imagine, like you're saying, like you have context about your business or what kinds of things you're doing, maybe in your Google Drive, in your typical documentation. And then you ask it to help you figure out how to do certain things with that context in mind.
It's craziness. So we've covered LLMs. Now we know what an LLM is. We've covered GPTs. Where do you think the best place for us to go next is? Is it to figure out how people can start to use these more effectively? Should we discuss maybe ways that we can properly prompt ChatGPT to get the best response out? Where do you think would be the best place for us to go, Kyle?
Yeah, I think maybe the next best place for us to go on this is to talk a little bit about the prompting, because this is kind of like the interface. You have to learn how to prompt it, how to interface with these algorithms, these models. If you don't know how to do that, then it's going to be kind of hard to make full use of it. And there are certain things that you need to keep in mind when you're writing your prompt. So, we talked first of all, we already talked about like the different types of models. So that's kind of like step one, is figuring out what the task is that you want to accomplish. And then based on that, you kind of choose the model. But then the actual like writing of the prompt is the next key thing. And depending on how you write your prompt, you could do really simple things with it, or you could get like really complex and you could do some really awesome things that maybe you hadn't thought of before.
That's incredible. Would it make sense, by the way, for us to put together a diagram maybe of, which models to use, which platform to use, and then maybe an idea of how people can prompt things properly or more effectively?
Yeah, I think so. I think what we could do is we could actually generate with maybe ChatGPT like a table of that information, and then we put that together and make that available to folks so that they can go and read it if they so choose. Or maybe we even give them the prompt that they could put into ChatGPT themselves. So we could do a mix of those things. I think that would be a good way to do it.
Let's do that. I think it's a great idea.
Awesome. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll share later the prompt I used, and it was really straightforward. So getting into the prompt a little bit, I think the thing that we need to think about is the degree to which you want to leverage this technology. So on the easy side of this is just ask it a general thing that you want it to do. Like, for example, you can say, if you know what the model is capable of, you can just ask it to do something based on those capabilities. So a good example of this would be what I did before, where I said, hey, I want to learn more about this thing. Could you please tell me about like, what are the features of these different GPTs, and make it clear. And so then it can just go kind of figure it out. And based on your prompt, it'll take a best guess at how to present that information. So that's like the simple way to do things. You can also ask some of these things to generate images for you. You might ask it to go search on the internet for certain information. Like you can do really simple stuff. And that's actually one of the ways that I commonly use these tools. Just even for my own learning, if I want to learn more.
I feel like this example would be also a simple version, but I did a PDF version of an underwriting of a property, and I pulled it into GPT, and I said, can you pull out all of the information that a private money lender would be interested in and format it into slides for me for my pitch deck? So I was able to look at it and say, well, this is really important. This is really important data. And then it put it in like a 6-page slide printout. And then from that, I was able to take that and create the slideshow myself. But it was like, okay, yeah, that does make sense. Like that specific field in that spreadsheet is really important for a private money lender. And so it made a whole slide about it.
That's awesome. Did you use ChatGPT for that, Emma?
I did.
And so you're saying that it was able to create the slide for you?
It said like slide 1, this is the content that you want to put into it. This, you may want to use this kind of graph, right? But it didn't give me the image itself. And so then I opened up Canva and I found a slideshow presentation that looked like it would be the right style. And I was able just to plug and play and create that fairly easy from just scratch, really, just from dragging and dropping.
And that's that's a really interesting use case, right? Because what you're basically trying to do is create an idea of what the content is supposed to look like in GPT, in ChatGPT. And then what you could do eventually is move that maybe even over into something like Gamma, right? Where you could even give ChatGPT a prompt and say, I'm eventually going to be putting this into Gamma. Can you give me the most detailed prompt so that I get all of this information into a Gamma presentation? Or something along those lines. Is that a good use case, Kyle?
Yeah, that's great, actually. So, earlier stages, I think these GPTs would have struggled probably with some of that, just because it didn't have context as to maybe what Gamma is. But you can provide some language around that would help guide it to making an informed decision on what kind of text should be generated. So that's a really great use case. I love that.
When you're using the different models, do you need to choose a specific model if that's what you're wanting to prompt it to? Or does all ChatGPT know Gamma and be able to code that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I would say is that you need to be careful with making assumptions about what the model has been trained on. Because again, like the base model is trained on a vast amount of data. And its knowledge, so to speak, is going to be dependent upon the data that it was trained on. So these engineers that are running these tools, they are periodically going through and they're adding more data to the base model, over time. That data may not always be up to date for like the time that you are putting in a question. So what I do when I'm trying to work with some of these things is, if I think it's a possibility that I might need some like well-known knowledge, for example, from the internet, then what I'll do is I'll toggle on either I'll either choose the model that has internet searching capabilities, or in ChatGPT, for example, I can, even for the single shot models like 4.0 or 4.1, I can toggle on the internet search tool. And for reference for everybody listening, I use the ChatGPT Plus version, so I'm paying roughly $20 a month for this. I think it's well worth it. Depending on if you're using the free version, you may not have access to all the tools and all the models. So that's just something to keep in mind. But if I know that I might need some external knowledge or information, and I don't want the GPT to just make up an answer, because it does that, right? It's based on statistics and probability. Then I will turn on those internet searching functionalities or capabilities and use that to augment the information that it has at its disposal. And then it can give me a much better answer.
That makes sense.
I think that'd be a really interesting thing to look at, because Emma, I don't know about you, but the way that I look at ChatGPT is I write my prompt in that search bar and I press go. That's all that I do, right? And so, Kyle, what I'm hearing you say is that there are other little things that you can do within that platform to make either your prompt maybe even a little bit better, or make the output better as a result of you clicking different things within ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so some of this, again, it just depends on the model that you choose, and it depends on the tools that you choose to give the model access to. So there's also a really important concept here that we've been kind of dancing around a little bit. I think it's really important that we hit on this, which is the idea of context for these models. So, we talked a little bit about how these models, if they don't have access to tools like to search the internet or whatever, they're going to be able to generate text based on the data that they're trained on, right? So there might be situations where you need to provide it additional context in your prompt. So this would be level 2, right? So Our base level was what you just described, Mike, of ask it a question and just let it go. Level 2, beyond, well, maybe this is level 3. Maybe level 2 is like being able to choose your model and toggle on certain features. And then level 3 would be, let's give it some more context. So that way it kind of knows what we're talking about and what we really want. And this is similar to, if we were having a discussion, if I just started saying like, hey, Mike, hey, Emma, Charlie just started like throwing up all over the floor the other day. Well, you have no idea who Charlie is. Like, you have no context for that. So these GPTs are similar in that, like, they're not going to know a ton about you personally. And so you have to be able to give it context. And the more context you give it, the more or the better of a set of text it's going to be able to generate. It's going to be able to perform better in general. And this concept, this is a little term that's kind of thrown out there in the technical space. It's called in-context learning. So the more context that you give it as a part of your prompting, the more information it has at its disposal, and then it can, based on that, give you better results.
So Kyle, let's break that down further for people, because I think you're exactly right. Emma and I are thinking about this from a much more simplistic level, right? Based on Emma's prompt, though. Wow, Emma, good for you. That sounds like a pretty complex prompt. How can people start to give it more context to make the response or the output better?
Okay, so this is great. So the key here is based on what the model is capable of doing. So like the simplest way to do this is to literally copy paste text into your prompt, and you say, maybe up front you say, hey, I want to do these types of things, and here's some context for you so you know. And you use maybe descriptive language. Like you might say, oh, well, I have this business. This is the name of the business. This is what we do. Here's some of the things that we have on our checklist and our SOPs, and you like copy paste it right in the prompt. And then you finish out your prompt by saying, do you understand? So that way it doesn't just go on and start generating a bunch of stuff. It'll kind of repeat back to you what it understands, and then it'll wait for you to give it additional instructions.
Okay. And so once you give it a prompt, you give it maybe a little bit more context. Can you go even deeper than that with providing it more context?
Yes, you can. And so this is now going to be where we kind of move into like level 4 and beyond. So these models, based on the context that you give it, will perform in certain ways. So this is where we start getting into this space of what people sometimes call prompt engineering, and what I've heard some other people describe as speaking to like a machine toddler. So it's funny to describe it that way, but it is kind of like that. You have to kind of tell it about the context and then describe exactly how you want things in a particular way. And this has been true for computers from the time that we've been programming. It's just that it's different. Now we use our language, like our English language, instead of programming things explicitly. So there's a couple of steps here which are important to keep in mind. So first of all, there's this idea of role playing. So when you are creating your prompt, you can start by telling it to play a certain role. So basically tell it that it is a certain type of person with a certain type of experience. You have it play pretend, essentially. And that kind of sets the pace for how it's going to speak to you. And then the second step there is to give it a goal. So you say, again, this is the type of person you are. Like maybe you are an expert in SEO marketing with over 20 years of experience, and you have worked with multi-million-dollar companies to help them generate billions of dollars in profit. Your goal is to help me in my business reach as many people as possible. I want to do this, this, and this with my business. I want to serve people in this way. So you are going to help me maximize my reach. And so you set it up by role playing, and then you give it a goal. And that kind of sets the pace for how the rest of it is going to be generated. And then we got a couple of other key steps there. But before I get into that, I want to give you guys some space to ask questions about that and pick my brain some more.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how specific and detailed do you go into the role or the job that you've given AI? Like, you can say you're a copywriter, or you can say that you're a copywriter who specializes in, helping in real estate, right? Like, how specific do you need to get in that role before moving forward with your prompt?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is it depends on how fine-tuned you want it to be to certain types of output or responses. So let's say that I wanted my output, let's go with the example of SEO marketing. Mm-hmm. Let's say I want my output to resemble what Microsoft does. Well, then I could go into detail and say, well, you've done this for Microsoft, or I could do a set of companies, or, reference different examples that are out there on the internet that it would have access to the data for. And depending on how deep you go with it, that'll kind of determine how fine-tuned it is to certain types of responses or output. So the answer is, it just depends on what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
You could tell a whole story. You've worked at Microsoft for 20 years. They gave you a gold watch. You retired. You had an issue with Bob. You could be really, really creative. I don't think I have any other questions about the role. Emma, you asked my question, which was how detailed can you get, and then why do you do that? Mm-hmm. Can we go into the goal a little bit more? So the way that I would naturally think about something like this is give it a very simplistic goal. I would probably say something that was less detailed than yours. I would say, I'm just trying to reach more customers. Help me create a plan to reach more customers, or something like that. Can you help people kind of expand on that goal to maybe get a better output from?
Yeah. So for this, Mike, I would say, it just kind of depends on how much you want it to help you versus how much guidance you want to give it. So if you want to have it come up with more information for you, then you might leave it a little bit more generic. There's this spectrum, I would say, on which you choose to go into more or less detail on the goal. But at the same time, if you have very particular outcomes in mind, then you should probably be very clear about those outcomes. So, for example, if you have certain revenue goals that you're trying to hit, then you might want to be very specific about those revenue goals, and you give it that context so that way it can know. Because as you work with it over time, again, this is just so people are clear, we're talking about in the same context of the same chat. So if you start moving across chats, depending on the tool that you're using, it may or may not keep some of that context. So in the context of the same chat, if you give it that information up front, the more you talk with it over and over again, and the more feedback you give it, like you could in theory say, hey, this is my revenue goal. I need some help brainstorming different ways to improve that. And then you go and you do the thing that it suggests, and then you come back and you give it the feedback to say, oh, well, this is how things have changed. I've been doing this and this and this. And so then it can kind of figure out, oh, well, we're on track or we're not, again, depending partly upon the model.
I made the mistake, and I don't know if any of you guys have done this, but I've made the mistake of sharing my ChatGPT account with my wife. And my wife's use case is very, very different than what mine is, right? Mine's real estate, mine's business related. Hers is psychology and things like flow states and stuff like that. And so what'll happen is I'll put a prompt in, and then it'll give me the response. And I was so confused as to why it started to incorporate psychology and flow states into my responses. Is there a way that, outside of getting people's own, your own account, individual accounts, is there a way to limit, access to a knowledge base to a single person within a single account?
Yeah, that's interesting. So what you just described was some of the features that ChatGPT has built in, where they'll take information about you and incorporate it into their understanding of you over time. And so you've got this mix now of your wife's personality with yours and your interest. So what you could do is you could probably, as a part of the context in the chat, you could probably say, hey, this is Mike, and so you up front say, kind of tell it who you are. So it kind of takes that information and correlates it to you. So that maybe is one way to do it. So your wife would also have to say, hey, this is me.
I forgot her name too for a second there. It wasn't just you.
So the other thing you might be able to do is tell it to forget everything that it's remembered previously. And you have to be kind of careful with that. But you could say maybe like, hey, please forget everything about me that you have previously known, and don't incorporate any of that into what you're about to tell me. Or you could guide it and say, hey, I am today really focused on this set of things like real estate. So there's different ways you could play with that to probably fine tune it for each chat window. But otherwise, you are going to be stuck in ChatGPT, at least, with some of the shared personality.
ChatGPT has different projects, right? Like on the paid version, you have different projects. Going into individual projects and having conversations, would that fix that problem, or would it still bleed into the other project conversations?
Yeah, it might still bleed over. There is this feature for the projects that I haven't tried yet, which it looks to me like you can, when you open up a project, actually put in a prompt at the top of the project to kind of guide it. So you might be able to do that. So that's a great example, Emma. Like, you might be able to create that project, go and put that prompt there in the project. So that way it kind of knows like everything under it, like how to organize, or how to organize the information and how to think about things.
Second question, if Mike wanted the simple solution of just kicking his wife out of his system, would it be as easy as going in and deleting those conversations versus archiving them? Or like, how would he go about erasing and going back to what it was before she was in there?
Yeah, so if I'm remembering correctly, inside of ChatGPT specifically, you can go inside of the settings, and there's a place where it'll like store the memories. I think it's as simple as just going into that section and deleting some of those little bits of information. So you may not have to go and delete the entirety of the chats. So that might be one way that you could also curate it.
You're brave, Mike. You're brave. My husband asked me the same question, and I told him no.
Oh, I'm not going to do it. In fact, if it happens, I'm going to have you break the news.
Okay.
I was thinking how interesting it would be to, you can reset, right? It's like reset to factory settings, ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we can't move the things that we can do with computing and technology into humans, but could you imagine going, hey, my wife's name is Lauren. Hey, Lauren, let's forget about that argument. Let's just reset, to 0 on that and just make things so much easier. But we've talked about the roles, identifying the roles, and then the goals of a prompt. So Kyle, what's steps 3 and 4?
Okay. So the next steps to this are going to be fine-tuning how you want the response to be. And so some of this depends on like how you think about it. So you'll start with the goal. You'll start with the role play and the goal. then typically you're going to kind of tell it what it is that you want. And so you'll say like, for example, now that I have all of that as context, and this can be in a single prompt or it could be as a follow-up prompt, you'll say something like, okay, now I want to create a marketing plan, and you might give it like a specific order of things that you want. So you might say, describe like the first thing that I should do, then describe the platform that I should use for this purpose. And then you might say, okay, then how do I tie all these things together? Like you can give it an order, like 1, 2, 3, whatever, give it the sequence. That kind of tells it then what it is that you want it to do, but you can further customize the output that you're going to get from it by telling it to write in certain styles. Some of this could be wrapped up into the role play section if you really wanted it to. So you can play with that however you desire. But for example, a really good use case is in copywriting. You can say, hey, I want you to generate all of this in a style that's at a high school reading level. So you can choose the reading level. You can say, oh, I want it to be in ye olde English. You could say, I want it in like a New York style, right? Or whatever it is. So you can kind of customize the way that it's going to generate that. And that helps kind of guide some of the output there. The other side of this is thinking more about like the input and output. So we talked a little bit about how the more context you give it, the better it's going to get at giving you the results you want. So if you want it to be like really giving you this specific type of output for certain types of input, then you also should specify that with examples. And so this is also how we would talk with, little toddlers or even just with adults, right? Like you might say, hey, I want you to go do this thing. And I kind of want it done in this way. So here are some examples of what this should look like. And so you say, okay, section examples, and then you say input example, output example. And the more of those you give it, the more fine-tuned you can make it. So that can include the style. It could also include certain formatting. So you might, in some ways, be able to like have it generate you a script with a certain type of format, like a title, a subtitle, maybe like an overview section, and then the actual like article or whatever it is. And so you can include that as a part of the output example, and you can use stuff like templating. It can kind of figure out, they want this here and this here. So you can do those kinds of things to be able to customize the output even further.
That's really cool. So let's break it down a little bit for the average user, right? What I see a lot, and Emma, I would love your input on this for your use case and the way that you see other people using ChatGPT, for example. What I see a lot of are people using ChatGPT to ask questions or to write an email or to write a text or to do those sorts of things. That's what I see 90% of the prompting in ChatGPT being currently with just basic novice type of users. Let's kind of go to like level 2, for example, and give people some ideas on how they can use ChatGPT or any other AI models to really, I don't know, just take a step forward in helping make their lives simpler or their work simpler. How can people do that?
Some examples of this, I think, could include, you gave the example of writing emails. I think that's a pretty common one for people. And in our last episode, Emma, you actually gave a really good example of like the spicy nice emails, right? Like,
yes.
So I think that can be a really good way to handle it. Like sometimes you might want something to come across professional and not to be like too aggressive. And so you can ask it to help you write those things. Some other examples, I think, when it comes to like communicating, that you could use it for are like sentiment analysis. And so you could do the reverse of what you had described previously, Emma, where you take somebody's email or their message to you and you ask it to kind of analyze it and give you some idea of the potential emotions behind what is being said. And if you wanted to flavor it to maybe help your own perspective on it, you could say, hey, lean more towards the positive side for interpretation, So there's things like that you could do. You could ask it to analyze a message and say, oh, well, could you help me understand this and clarify any misunderstandings that could arise from the way that this was said, or could you tell me the different potential interpretations for how this was said? So those are like some different ways that you could use this.
So marriage counseling GPT is coming out.
Yeah. I think that honestly, that could be a good use case because like when you're communicating with people and you're not like face to face or even on a video, it can be really difficult to understand some of the additional context behind how somebody wrote something. And not everybody's like super skilled at writing, or they might like write something in a way that they thought was clear, but it just wasn't, So I think you can help with those kinds of circumstances for sure.
Marriage counseling GPTs?
Yeah.
I love it. I think that's great. How about parenting GPTs?
Oh, especially because then you can get specific on age, right? Like my three-nager versus my teenager who thinks that they're already ready to fly the coop kind of situation.
Those are some good use cases, y'all. There's, beyond all this, like I think the thing to keep in mind is basically any way that you can generate, any way that you would typically write or communicate something, like these GPTs are going to be good for, whether you are doing copywriting. Now a lot of them have the ability to create logos and stuff like that. So like there's lots of different ways that you can kind of customize some of the context that you feed it and then ask it to give you those outputs. One way that I use it in my own content writing is that I don't want to really spend a lot of time writing hashtags. Like I think they can be useful, but it's like I have to sit there and like be super creative about all the hashtags I create. Why don't I just use like ChatGPT to generate those for me? And so I've written out all my articles in a separate like Google Doc, and I can feed those in and say, hey, give me my hashtags for this in a space. It's separated by spaces, and then it just generates it for me, and then I can add it to my document. And then the cool thing about that is it has additional context for my writing style already built into the chat. And so then I can reference that if I need some help brainstorming or even sometimes writing something from scratch if I give it some additional ideas for where I want to take my content. So it's anything really creative that you need to communicate. That's where the power of these things are going to be.
I feel like we're just kind of scratching the surface of how we can use AI personally and then professionally. And I think that's our goal here, right? Is to figure out and help others how they can use this to their advantage, whatever that advantage is. Is there anything else, Kyle, that we want to mention about the general topics for today? The LLMs, ChatGPTs or GPTs. And then, of course, we've talked about prompting a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would just throw out here is when you're using these tools, leverage them for your own personal learning. And that includes going a little meta with this, which just means using ChatGPT to help you use ChatGPT. So the thing is, like, we have the information now available on the internet about these LLMs. And so you can take advantage of these models to then go do research for you and explain things to you. So if you want to learn more about, say, how to write a prompt, you could open up ChatGPT's O3 model and then ask it, hey, could you tell me about some of these different models? Here's my use case. Explain to me what models I might want for certain and what platforms I might want. You could even ask it, hey, to help me write this prompt, because the prompt itself is text. So you can say, based on that information that you know about these AI models, I want you to help me write a prompt. And you could do it for additional text generation, or you could do it for image generation. That's one way that a lot of people have used it to generate like logos, for example. And I actually literally just did this the other day for our podcast, actually. I said, hey, this is our podcast. Here's our tagline. Here's our description. This is what we're trying to do. I want you to help me come up with a simplistic image for our logo. And I want you to give me some ideas for colors, and help me write the prompt to actually generate the image. And so then I took the prompt and I just popped it back in there and it created the image for us. So you can think of things like that. Use it as a tool to even help your own learning and help your productivity step by step.
One of the ways that I've seen people do it, so one of the ways that I've seen people use, GPT is in preparation for an event or a meetup, right? Hey, this is the event that I'm going to. This is the context of what's going to be talked about. These are the people that are going to be there. This is what I hope to get out of it. Can you help me hone down what my pitch is when somebody asks me, like, what do I do or why am I here, right? And so you're able to go back and forth with the GPT to get it very precise, and you're able to not fumble over your words or talk forever and ever whenever you're there at the event and you're meeting new people.
I think that's so cool. What I was going to say to Kyle after what you said was, can you guys humor me for just 1 second? I think it's interesting to think about how we can use AI along with this podcast in capacities like, for example, maybe editing a podcast or creating a thumbnail for a podcast or creating notes, right? Transcribing the podcast and creating, like, summarizing notes. I think it's really interesting to start to think this way, because I think that that way of thinking you can translate into other things that you're doing using AI. So Kyle, what ways can we use AI in relation to this podcast, just to give people an idea of kind of how to think about these sorts of things?
Yeah. So one way that I know I'll be using it is the way that I've been using it for some of my own personal content. What I will do is I will take the transcript of our conversation, and then I'll ask it to generate me a title and a description and hashtags. And then I'll also ask it to generate non-soliciting social media posts based on that transcript.
Why non-soliciting, Kyle?
Well, because certain platforms like Facebook don't like it when you try to sell in certain groups. And so you don't want it to come across as a sales pitch. You want it to come across as like a value add for people. So that's the reason why. But I'll actually like take the text transcript and I will feed it in as context. So that way it has the full information of all the different things that we talked about, and then be able to generate something that's really relevant that kind of makes itself known in the description or the title of the video.
Let's take that one step further. And let's think about, just for a second, outside of this podcast, that use case, right? Maybe a transcript, an audio recording, putting a summary of a transcript, creating social media posts out of it. You can create threads and tweets or whatever we're calling those things these days. And what other ways can we kind of expand that out a little bit or extend that use case?
Yeah, I think along that line of thinking, you could also, if you wanted to have it generate certain types of text in certain ways, then maybe it makes sense to go find some well-known content creators and then pull in their information, their their style of writing, maybe their transcripts, and then you use that as a springboard to help your GPT then write your stuff in similar type ways. Mm-hmm. So that would be one way that we could leverage that and provide additional context. Like, I don't know if we want to be a Mr. Beast per se, but we could go find some other really well-known podcasts out there and use them as examples.
You could even plug in the transcript or the audio recording, and you can almost analyze your own performance on the podcast as well, right? Say,
oh yeah, that's good.
How could I be a better host for this podcast, or how could I have introduced the podcast better? And it starts to give me some options. So you kind of use it as like a trainer, right, for yourself.
Yeah, I love that, Mike. That's funny because I think that idea is very applicable to a lot of different fields. Like you could do that kind of thing also with like cold calling, for example. I know a lot of like real estate investors out there that we know could benefit probably from some analysis of their cold calls. So that would be a great use case, I think, for those folks as well.
Or as the manager level, right? Like if you have a team that are new and they're making those calls for you, that having that plugged into the GPT, you as the manager can see where they're performing and where they need additional training, and why your KPIs are not hitting where you thought they would hit, right?
Or on a very large level too, think about the collection of all of those transcripts of phone calls, compare those to successful sales. What happened in those phone calls that maybe can support that being a successful sale versus a not successful sale, mm-hmm. right? The more data that you have, the more you can analyze.
Yeah,
exactly. I love how you said that, Mike, because this is a data game at this point. The more data you have, the better it is going to be. And the more examples that you can provide it, the better it's going to be. So I love that. I love the idea that you threw out there, Emma. I love what you just said there, Mike. There's so many different applications, guys. Like this is going to be a wild couple of years.
And this is going to be an amazing podcast, right? Because we get to go in here and like we're brainstorming as we're learning, and we're like, oh wow, like yeah, we could totally use it that way, right?
Do it live, public, streaming, the whole thing. Pressure. We're all where we go, right? Like I said before, we're just scratching the surface with AI individually and professionally. We're also scratching the surface with this podcast too, right? So, Kyle, what do we have looking forward? What are some of the things that we're going to be covering looking forward?
Yeah, so some of this depends on the feedback that we get from you guys watching. Please, if you've got feedback, we want to hear it. We want to know what you want to learn about. I think without feedback, it would probably make sense for us to go deeper on some of these different tools. Like maybe we go a little deeper on ChatGPT, or maybe we go a little deeper on Claude or Gemini, or how to like hook some of these things into a tool like Zapier, things like that. Maybe talk a little bit more about the model context protocol. I think we could definitely take it that direction, and we could probably also go into some very specific use cases that we think of together as a group. So there's lots to explore. But yes, for folks listening, please give us some feedback. We want to hear what you want to learn about. We want to hear some of the problems that you're running into. That'll help give us a good idea of how we can provide value in this podcast.
Emma, what do you want to learn?
Everything. I want to learn everything. But really, I'm wanting to know more about automations, right? Today, we talked a lot about, I feel like, AI, but knowing these different platforms that we have and diving into the automation side of it, what is already there, right? What could be there? For instance, like Go High Level. Go High Level is used by a lot of investors in the real estate world. There's a lot of automations. There is AI in there, but there's a lot of automations as well. And I would just love to know what is there, what needs to be turned on versus what is automatically turned on. And how can I better use these platforms for the investors that I help?
What about you, Mike?
I think I'm very, very interested in, gosh, that's such a hard question. I wasn't prepared. I was only prepared to ask the question, Kyle, not answer it.
Don't you love how I'm putting you on the spot?
Yeah, no, thank you. Because I put Emma on the spot. Sorry about that, Emma. I think that what I'm trying to figure out with regard to AI is, I think I've learned that there's very little limitation. And, I can think very, very far out, right? I can think of anything basically anything's possible, I think, right? But it's how exactly does it all work together? And then what I'm actually really interested in, which is totally off topic potentially, but it's the ethics of AI.
Yeah.
And, at what point do we really start to think about using AI ethically?
Mm-hmm.
And that, incorporates things like creating avatars of yourself. As the technology gets better, specifically with regard to that, it's going to be very, very difficult to tell the difference between, is this Mike talking or is this his avatar? Mm-hmm. And we're not there yet. I mean, to the general public at least, but we're getting very, very surprisingly close. And so I think the ethics of AI is really where a lot of my focus is going to be. Now, from the expert's point of view, now I'm going to throw it back on you, Kyle. From the expert's point of view, where does an expert like you think with regard to AI? What do you want to learn, focus on, build off of?
Oh,
see, it's hard.
It is hard because there's so much out there. I am really right now kind of digging deep into this voice AI space personally, and that's just partly because of my business model, and also because I think that's where we're kind of headed. Like, the voice AI technology has just gotten so good recently that it's like, man, the latency is getting lower when let's say you call it up on a phone, the latency is getting so much better. The models are getting so much better. Like, they can communicate with you more like a real person. And then with the new like MCP, that protocol we talked about earlier, man, the capabilities of these things are just exploding. Like, when Zapier announced that they were making their platform available to use through MCP, like, that just opened up the floodgates, y'all. And so it's like, there's a lot of, I think, opportunity for people to take advantage of these tools. And so that's kind of why my focus is there. I think that's going to be how most people start to interface with these things most of the time. Like, there's obviously ChatGPT, the text interface, but I think the voice interface is the next big thing that hasn't yet been implemented by people. And with the additional tools, I just think that's the way to go. So that's where my focus is primarily.
Kyle, is there any reason to start to maybe have a module here or a sort of mini type of podcast on how to start thinking differently? What I've found, and tell me if I'm crazy here, but what I've found is that the way that my brain has worked now that AI is around is very different than it was working before. Meaning now I'm starting to think about, how do I prompt correctly to get the output that I want? Like I mentioned before, I think that a lot of things, there's not a whole lot of limit to what is possible. So how can maybe people start to think bigger on things? Or, I think that the mindset, it's almost like an AI mindset. How is that affected? Have you been affected to some degree? Or is it just me being, hippie Mike?
No, definitely. I have as well. I think some of this shift is just how do we think about up-leveling ourselves, really? Because, like, I look at a lot of these tools that we have now as almost like leveling the playing field, or maybe not leveling the playing field, but lowering the barrier to entry for certain types of things that we would typically have had to spend a lot of time learning how to do. A good example of this is I'll go back to the copywriting because I think that's one of the most straightforward things that is really clearly evident. For example, I don't have a background in copywriting. And I'm definitely wanting to learn more about copywriting, but I can expedite how quickly I learn about it, and how quickly I start providing value through my writing by leveraging AI. It's not quite as painstaking, and I can ask it to give me good examples and to critique my writing. And so, these are tools that give you options to do things that you might not have been able to easily do in the past. And I think that opens the floodgates for creativity for people. So that's how I think about it, is how can I use these tools to help myself be more creative, help myself do more, improve my own skills, my own understanding in the long run.
Yeah. I think for me, it's definitely been a shift of mind in research because, in this Sedona, Arizona area, I know that there's this movement of the regentrification of Sedona. The prices have gone up and it's slowly trickling out. But I don't have the time in the day to sit down and find the research and dive into it and compile something that I can present to investors, in the future for this area. So I was able to buy back my time by utilizing, GPT to pull all that data from the, internet and bring it into one document that I could create a report about where this area is and where they're going to go in the next 5 years, right? So something that would have taken probably weeks for me to do, especially with kids and businesses, was now able to be done in one sit down with GPT.
So we obviously have a lot of things that we want to cover, right? And I don't think this is ever going to be something that ever ends for us. Hopefully it doesn't, right? We're always constantly learning, updating. As technology changes, we're going to lean on Kyle more and more. So having said that, you guys are the best. Thank you guys so much. Kyle, you're fantastic. Emma, thank you so much for all that you guys do. We will see you guys next time.
Awesome.
Thank you guys.